Okay, so, interviews can be a bit like walking a tightrope.
Yeah.
You've got to balance confidence and competence, all while, trying to make a good impression.
Right.
And it can be nerve-wracking.
Yeah, absolutely.
But what if I told you this deep dive is like a masterclass in interviewing?
Oh, I like that.
Whether you're asking the questions or in the hot seat.
Yeah, and you're right. Interviews can be a powerful tool,
Right.
but they can also be a bit of a mystery.
Yeah.
Luckily, we've got this incredible guide on interviewing techniques
Oh, cool.
to help us crack the code.
All right, well then tell me, why does mastering this stuff matter so much?
Mhm.
Is it really more than just, acing job interviews?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Think about it. Strong interviewing skills are valuable in so many areas of life. It's about extracting information, effectively understanding people better, and building connections.
Right.
Whether you're negotiating a deal or resolving a conflict or just having a deeper conversation with a friend, these skills can make all the difference.
That's interesting. The guide talks a lot about the importance of prepping for an interview.
Yes.
It seems like they really emphasize knowing exactly what you're trying to achieve before you even start.
You're spot on. Defining the purpose of the interview is crucial.
Okay.
Are you trying to get a job, gather information for a project,
Right.
or maybe persuade someone to invest in your startup?
Yeah.
Each scenario demands a different approach.
Okay, so how do you make sure you're truly prepared, even if you know the purpose?
Well, here's a tip that I think is often overlooked.
What's that?
Research.
Okay.
Even just a little digging into the subject organization or the person you're interviewing can make a huge difference. Like finding shared connections on LinkedIn
Oh, yeah.
to establish common ground right from the start.
Right.
It shows you're genuinely interested, and it allows you to ask much more insightful questions.
That makes sense. I guess showing up prepared can really set the tone for the entire interview.
Right. And speaking of setting the tone, the guide also dives into the importance of structuring the interview
Okay.
and choosing the right types of questions.
Oh, yeah, like open-ended questions versus closed-ended ones.
Those are the basics, for sure.
I remember learning about those in school.
But even if you know the difference, there are nuances to how you use them.
Okay.
For example, if you want to craft truly compelling, open-ended questions, try using the TED-W framework.
TED-W.
Tell me, explain, describe, walk me through.
Oh.
This helps you go beyond just surface-level questions and really dig into the details.
I love that TED-W. I'm writing that down. It's like having a secret weapon for getting people to open up.
Exactly. And it can help you avoid those vague questions that leave the interviewee feeling lost.
Right.
You want to create a clear path for the conversation to flow naturally.
Okay, so besides having killer questions, what else makes for a great interview environment? Because I can imagine some pretty disastrous settings, like trying to have a serious conversation in a noisy coffee shop.
You're not wrong. The guide does touch on the practical aspects of setting the stage.
Okay.
Choosing a quiet, comfortable location, minimizing distractions, making sure your equipment works. If you're doing a video call,
Right.
it all contributes to a professional and respectful atmosphere.
Right. You don't want the interviewee to feel like they're being interrogated in a dimly lit basement or something.
Definitely not the vibe we're going for.
No.
Once you've set the stage, it's time for the heart of the matter, the interview itself.
Yeah.
And the guide kicks things off with a really interesting concept, establishing rapport.
I was wondering about that.
Yeah.
It sounds like it goes beyond just making small talk, right?
Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
about creating a genuine connection.
Okay.
You might find common ground share, a relevant anecdote, or just offer a genuine compliment.
Right.
It's about building that sense of trust that allows for a more open and honest conversation.
So it's like building a bridge of understanding before you even start asking the tough questions.
Exactly.
I like that.
It's amazing how much a little rapport can influence the entire interview.
Yeah.
And once you've built that connection, the guide emphasizes the importance of something we've probably all heard of, but might not be doing effectively.
What's that?
Active listening.
Okay, so remind me, what makes active listening so different from just, hearing what someone's saying?
It's a fantastic question and a crucial distinction.
Okay.
Imagine this. You're interviewing someone for a project.
Okay.
You ask them about their experience, and they start rattling off a list of accomplishments. Passive listening is simply hearing the words they say.
Right.
Active listening, on the other hand,
Yeah.
is about engaging with those words, paying attention to their tone of voice,
Right.
their body language, and the subtle nuances in their responses.
So it's like you're trying to understand the meaning behind the words, not just the words themselves.
Exactly.
Okay.
Active listening is about picking up on those cues that tell you so much more than what's being said explicitly.
I see what you mean. It makes me think of how you sometimes notice a friend's smile doesn't quite reach their eyes,
Yes.
even though they're telling you they're fine.
That's a perfect example.
Yeah.
It's about being attuned to the whole picture, not just the surface level.
Right.
And trust me, mastering this can be a game changer in any interview.
Okay, so we've covered preparing, setting the stage, establishing rapport, and active listening.
Yeah.
Sounds like we're well on our way to becoming interview ninjas.
We're getting there. But there's another key ingredient we need to add to the mix,
Oh, okay.
and that's the art of asking the right questions.
I was wondering when we'd get back to that. We talked about open-ended questions earlier, but it feels like there's a whole strategy behind knowing when to use them, right?
There is, think of it like this. You're a detective trying to solve a case. Open-ended questions are your way of gathering clues and piecing together the bigger picture. You might ask, what led you to this career path? Or what are your thoughts on the future of this industry?
I see those questions give the interviewee space to really elaborate and share their perspective.
Right. And then you have closed-ended questions, which are more like confirming specific details or getting a quick yes or no answer.
Right.
These are useful for clarifying facts or getting a concise response.
So it's about having a balance of both types of questions.
Exactly. You wouldn't ask a suspect in a crime drama, tell me everything you know right.
Right.
You need a mix of broad exploration and targeted inquiries to get to the truth.
That makes so much sense. But what about those times when you get a vague answer? Does the guide offer any tips for dealing with that?
It does. Sometimes an interviewee might give a generic or evasive answer.
Right.
That's your cue to dig deeper.
Good.
You can rephrase the question, ask a follow-up question, or even gently challenge their response.
Okay.
The key is to remain curious and engaged, even when the answers aren't crystal clear.
That's interesting. I'm already starting to see how these skills could be useful in all sorts of situations, not just formal interviews.
Exactly. And that's what makes this so fascinating.
Yeah.
These techniques can be applied to so many different areas of life.
Right.
It's really about understanding human interaction on a deeper level.
So we've covered preparing, setting the stage, establishing rapport, active listening, and asking the right questions.
Yes,
It feels like we've got a solid foundation for any interview.
we do.
But is there anything else the guide highlights that we should be aware of?
There's one more crucial element that we haven't touched on yet,
Oh, okay.
and it's something we often overlook: the power of nonverbal communication.
Oh, yeah. Body language. That's a whole other layer to this, isn't it?
It is.
I remember reading somewhere that crossing your arms can make you seem closed off. Is that true?
Well, it's a bit more nuanced than that.
Okay.
The guide dives into how our posture gestures and even eye contact can send powerful messages,
Right?
often without us even realizing it.
So it's not just about what we say, it's about how we say it and how we present ourselves.
Precisely. And the interesting thing is that it works both ways.
What do you mean?
You can use your own body language to project confidence and build rapport, but you can also read the interviewee's nonverbal cues to get a better sense of how they're feeling.
So it's like becoming a human lie detector. But not in a creepy way, more like just being attuned to those subtle signals that people send out.
That's a great way to put it. And the guide offers some fascinating insights into specific gestures and their interpretations.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more. What kind of things should I be looking out for?
Well, for example, if you're mirroring someone's body language subtly, it can actually help build rapport and create a sense of connection.
Whoa, really?
Uh-huh.
That's wild. I'm never going to look at crossed arms the same way again.
Yeah,
But isn't that a bit manipulative?
it's a good question. And it's important to be mindful of how you're using these techniques.
Right.
Mirroring should feel natural and authentic, not forced or calculated.
Okay.
It's more about subtly aligning yourself with the other person's energy and creating a sense of harmony.
So it's like finding a shared rhythm in the conversation rather than trying to control the dance.
Exactly. And it's fascinating how even small adjustments in your body language can make a difference in how you're perceived.
Wow, this is blowing my mind. I never realized how much was going on beneath the surface in a conversation.
That's the beauty of this, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's always more to learn, more to explore, and more to discover about the art of communication.
I can't wait to dive deeper into this nonverbal stuff.
Right.
It feels like we're just scratching the surface here.
We are. And the guide has a lot more to say on the topic.
Okay.
But for now, let's move on to the next stage of the interview process, wrapping things up effectively.
Right. Because even if you've had a great conversation, it's important to end things on a strong note.
Absolutely.
What does the guide recommend?
Well, it emphasizes the importance of summarizing key points.
Okay.
It's about ensuring that everyone is on the same page and that there's a shared understanding of what was discussed.
So it's like tying a neat little bow on the package.
You got it.
You're recapping the main takeaways and confirming any agreements or follow-up actions.
And then comes a step that I think is often overlooked,
What's that?
allowing for the interviewee's final input. Asking something simple like, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Oh.
Can reveal hidden gems.
Oh, that's a great point. I've never thought about that before.
Yeah.
It's like giving them one last chance to share something that might have been on their mind but didn't quite fit into the previous questions.
Right. You never know what valuable insights you might glean from that final open-ended question.
Okay, I'm definitely adding that to my interview toolkit.
Uh-huh.
So summarizing key points, giving space for final thoughts, and of course expressing gratitude for the interviewee's time and insights.
Yes,
It feels like those are the essential ingredients for a strong finish.
they are. And the guide also highlights the importance of providing clear next steps,
Okay.
whether it's outlining the feedback timeline, the decision-making process, or the next stage in a project.
Yeah.
It provides closure and sets expectations.
It's like drawing a roadmap for what the future holds, then the interviewee doesn't feel left hanging.
Exactly. You want them to walk away feeling informed and respected, regardless of the outcome.
This is all so insightful, but I'm curious, does the guide stop there?
Mhm.
Is that the end of the interview process?
Actually, there's more.
Really?
And it's a part that's often overlooked, but can be incredibly valuable,
Okay.
the post-interview phase.
Interesting. What happens after the recorder stops?
Well, there's several key steps that the guide emphasizes.
Okay.
First, there's review and analysis.
Mm.
It's about going through your notes, recordings, or transcripts while the conversation is still fresh in your mind.
Okay.
You're looking for those key insights,
Yeah.
identifying themes and connecting the dots.
It's like sifting through a treasure chest of information and pulling out the most valuable gems, right?
Precisely.
You're looking for those nuggets of wisdom that will inform your next steps.
And then comes the follow-up.
Okay.
This could be as simple as sending a thank you email or message, but it can also involve addressing any promised follow-ups, like providing additional information or scheduling a follow-up meeting.
It's about keeping the lines of communication open and showing that you value the relationship you've built with the interviewee.
Exactly. And finally, the guide encourages self-evaluation, taking the time to reflect on what went well,
Yeah.
what could have been done differently, and how you can improve your interviewing skills for next time is invaluable.
It's like leveling up your interviewing game by analyzing your performance and identifying areas where you can shine even brighter. You know, I actually have a personal tip for self-improvement.
Yeah.
That I've found incredibly helpful.
What's that?
I record myself during practice interviews.
That's a great idea. I
Yeah.
can see how that would be incredibly helpful.
It's amazing what you pick up on when you watch yourself back. You
Huh.
notice those little verbal tics, those
Yeah.
awkward pauses,
Hmm.
and even those moments where you could have phrased a question better.
Yeah.
It's like having your own personal coach providing feedback.
That's a brilliant strategy, and the guide echoes this sentiment, emphasizing the importance of seeking feedback from others, if possible.
It sounds like it all comes back to that idea of continuous learning and improvement.
Yes.
We're not just trying to be perfect in every interview.
Right.
We're using each experience as a stepping stone to becoming better communicators.
You've hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
The interview doesn't end when the conversation stops. It's an ongoing process of reflection, analysis, and growth.
This has been so eye-opening. We've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive into interviewing techniques.
It has.
From preparing like a pro to mastering the art of questioning, listening, and even reading body language.
Yeah.
It feels like we've uncovered a treasure trove of valuable insights.
I agree. It's been a fascinating exploration so far,
Yeah.
and I'm really excited to continue our deep dive in the next part.
Okay.
We'll be exploring how to adapt these techniques for different situations and personalities, how to navigate tricky waters, and how to truly master the art of the interview.
I can't wait. But before we move on, I just want to remind everyone that this deep dive is based on a comprehensive guide to interviewing techniques.
Yes,
And it's packed with even more valuable insights than we have time to cover today.
absolutely. I highly encourage you to check out the source material.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic resource for anyone who wants to level up their communication skills and become a more effective interviewer.
So stay tuned because we're about to get even deeper into the art of the interview. Welcome back. I'm still buzzing from all those insightful tips we uncovered in the first part of our deep dive into interviewing techniques.
I know, right?
It's amazing how much strategy goes into a seemingly simple conversation.
And we've only just scratched the surface.
Right.
There's a whole world of nuances and strategies to explore.
Well, I'm ready to dive even deeper. What else does the guide reveal about taking our interviewing skills to the next level?
One thing that really stood out to me was the emphasis on adaptability.
Okay.
The guide reminds us that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to interviewing. You need to tailor your style and techniques to the specific situation and the person you're interviewing.
That makes sense. I mean, you wouldn't use the same approach when interviewing a CEO for a leadership position as you would when chatting with someone for a volunteer role, would you?
Exactly.
Right.
The guide provides some great examples of how to adapt your style
Okay.
based on the interviewee's personality and the context of the interview.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, if you're interviewing a seasoned professional,
Yeah.
you might maintain a more formal tone and focus on technical questions related to their expertise.
Whereas if you're interviewing someone for a more creative role,
Right.
you might loosen things up a bit and focus on their portfolio or their creative process.
Precisely. It's about reading the room, understanding the dynamics,
Right.
and adjusting your approach accordingly.
And speaking of adapting, the guide also acknowledges the role of technology in modern interviewing.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Video calls have become so common these days.
Right.
It feels like you can connect with anyone, anywhere, at any time. But does the guide offer any specific tips for navigating those virtual interviews?
It does.
Okay.
It highlights the importance of ensuring good lighting and sound quality,
Right.
minimizing distractions in your background, and maintaining clear and concise communication.
Okay.
It's also important to be mindful of your body language and eye contact, even on video,
Yeah,
as these cues can still convey a lot of information.
that's a good point. I definitely been on video calls where someone's staring off into space and it's hard to tell if they're even listening.
It's all about being present and engaged,
Right.
whether you're face-to-face or screen-to-screen.
Right. And speaking of presence, the guide also touches on the importance of cultural sensitivity in interviewing.
Yes, especially in today's globalized world.
Oh, that's crucial. I can imagine cultural differences could lead to misunderstandings or misinterpretations if you're not careful.
Absolutely. It's important to be mindful of cultural norms and differences,
Right.
to adapt our approach accordingly, and to avoid making assumptions or generalizations based on someone's background.
So it's about being respectful of individual perspectives and creating an inclusive and welcoming environment for everyone.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that communication is a two-way street,
Right.
and it's our responsibility to make sure everyone feels heard and understood.
I love that it's a good reminder that even though we're focusing on interviewing techniques, it's really about building meaningful connections with people.
It is, and that brings us to a point that I think is incredibly important,
What's that?
and that is the power of practice.
Okay.
The guide emphasizes that you can't just read about interviewing techniques.
Right.
You have to put them into action.
You're so right. It's like learning to ride a bike.
Exactly.
You can read all the manuals in the world, but until you get on and start pedaling, you won't truly develop those skills.
The guide suggests conducting mock interviews to refine your technique
Okay.
and get comfortable with the flow of a real interview.
Right.
You can practice with a friend, a mentor,
Mm.
or even just record yourself to identify areas for improvement.
Oh, that's a good idea. I've heard of people recording themselves for public speaking practice, but I never thought about doing it for interviews.
Yeah.
It's like having a behind-the-scenes look at your own performance.
It is, and it can be incredibly revealing.
Yeah.
You might notice those little verbal tics, those awkward pauses,
Right.
or even those moments where you could have phrased a question better.
Yeah.
It's like having your own personal feedback loop to help you refine your skills.
And the more you practice, the more confident and natural you'll become in any interview situation.
Exactly.
It's like anything else, the more you do it, the better you get.
Exactly. And remember, the goal isn't to become a perfectly polished interviewing robot.
Right.
It's about finding your own authentic style and using these techniques as tools to enhance your communication and build genuine connections with people.
Okay, that's a good point. I was starting to worry about sounding too scripted or rehearsed. I don't want to lose my own personality in the process of trying to master these techniques.
That's a valid concern, and I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah.
Authenticity is key in any interaction, and especially in interviews.
Right.
People can sense when you're being genuine, and they respond to that.
So it's about finding that sweet spot between being prepared and knowledgeable while also being yourself. And allowing your personality to shine through.
It's about striking that balance between structure and spontaneity, between preparation and presence.
Now that we're talking about those moments where things might not go exactly as planned,
Yeah.
does the guide offer any advice for handling challenging situations during an interview?
It does.
Okay.
It dedicates a whole section
Yeah.
to navigating those tricky waters.
All right.
And it provides some incredibly helpful strategies
Okay.
for dealing with everything from nervous interviewees
Right.
to those who might be trying to dodge your questions.
Ooh, this sounds interesting. Like, what kind of tactics are we talking about?
Hmm.
Because I can imagine feeling pretty flustered if someone starts getting defensive or evasive.
Well, the guide emphasizes the importance of staying calm and composed,
Mm-hmm.
even when the interviewee is throwing you curveballs.
Right.
It suggests techniques like redirecting the conversation, rephrasing questions,
Uh-huh.
and even using silence strategically to encourage the interviewee to elaborate.
So it's about staying in control of the situation even when it feels like things are getting a bit off track.
Exactly. It's about being flexible and adaptable, and always remembering your purpose for the interview.
Right.
If you encounter resistance or pushback, gently remind the interviewee of the goals of the conversation
Okay.
and the importance of their input.
And I imagine active listening plays a big role in those situations too, right?
Absolutely.
Being able to pick up on those subtle cues and adjust your approach accordingly.
Active listening is your superpower in any challenging interview situation.
Right.
It allows you to stay attuned to the interviewee's emotional state, anticipate their responses, and navigate those tricky waters with grace and confidence.
Okay, this is all making me feel much more prepared for anything that might come up during an interview.
That's the spirit.
It's like having a secret weapon in my back pocket.
And remember, even the most experienced interviewers encounter challenges from time to time.
Right.
It's all part of the process, and it's how you handle those challenges that truly sets you apart.
This is all so insightful. It's amazing how many layers there are to this whole interviewing process.
Yeah.
I feel like we could talk about this for hours.
Me too. It's a topic that I'm endlessly fascinated by.
Yeah.
But before we get too carried away,
Okay.
let's take a step back and reflect on what we've covered so far in this second part of our deep dive.
Sounds like a good plan. My brain is buzzing with all these new ideas and strategies.
We started by talking about the importance of adaptability,
Okay.
tailoring your approach to the specific person and context of the interview.
Right.
We then explored the impact of technology on modern interviewing
Right.
and the need for clear, concise communication in virtual settings.
And we discussed the importance of cultural sensitivity,
Yes.
recognizing that communication is a two-way street and being mindful of the diverse perspectives and backgrounds of the people we interview.
We also highlighted the power of practice,
Yeah.
emphasizing that mastering these techniques takes more than just reading about them.
Right.
It's about putting them into action, conducting mock interviews,
Right.
and seeking feedback to refine your skills.
And finally, we touched on the art of navigating tricky interview situations,
Yes.
remaining calm and composed when faced with challenging interviewees, and using active listening and strategic communication techniques to stay in control of the conversation.
That's a great summary. It's amazing how much ground we've covered in just this second part of our deep dive.
I know, right? And I'm already feeling so much more confident and equipped to handle any interview that comes my way.
That's fantastic to hear. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive,
Yeah.
I want to emphasize that this is just a glimpse into the wealth of knowledge and insights that the guide has to offer.
That's right. This deep dive is just a starting point. I highly encourage you to explore the source material further. It's a treasure trove of interviewing wisdom that can help you level up your communication skills and become a more effective interviewer in any situation.
Absolutely. So stay tuned for the final part of our deep dive,
Okay.
where we'll be revealing even more valuable tips and strategies from the guide,
All right.
including how to make a lasting impression, how to follow up effectively, and how to turn every interview into a valuable learning experience.
Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into interviewing techniques. It's been quite a journey, hasn't it?
It has.
We've gone from feeling like interviews were this big, scary mystery to uncovering all these amazing strategies for mastering them.
It's been an exciting exploration for sure.
Yeah.
And I'm thrilled we're wrapping things up with this final part.
Okay.
We've got some really interesting insights to share from the guide,
Okay.
focusing on how to truly make the most of every interview experience.
Okay, so Tell me what stood out to you as we were revisiting the material for this last part of the deep dive.
Hmm.
What are those key takeaways that you think will really help our listeners level up their interview game?
As we were going through the guide,
Uh-huh.
something that really resonated with me was the emphasis on being present in the moment
Mm-hmm.
during an interview.
Oh, I like that.
It's not just about following a script or ticking boxes. It's about being genuinely engaged in the conversation, listening attentively,
Yeah.
and responding authentically.
It makes me think of how sometimes you can tell when someone's just going through the motions in a conversation.
Right.
And it makes such a difference when you feel like the other person is truly present and interested in what you have to say.
Exactly. And that level of presence can make all the difference in an interview.
Right.
It allows you to connect with the interviewee on a deeper level,
Hmm.
pick up on those subtle cues, and really understand their perspective.
So it's not just about extracting information, it's about creating a space for genuine dialogue and connection.
Right.
And I bet that makes the whole experience more enjoyable for both parties, right?
Absolutely. When you're fully present and engaged,
Yeah.
the interview becomes less about interrogation and more about exploration,
Mm-hmm.
a shared journey of discovery.
I like that.
And that's where the real magic happens.
Hmm.
When you allow the conversation to unfold organically
Hmm.
and embrace those moments of unexpected insight.
Speaking of unexpected insights, I remember you mentioned earlier that the guide has some tips for how to really make a lasting impression during an interview.
Yes.
What are some of the things they recommend? Because I know first impressions matter, but it feels like it's more than just showing up on time and dressing appropriately.
Right. It goes beyond the surface level.
Okay.
The guide emphasizes the importance of showcasing your authentic self,
Right.
highlighting your unique strengths and experiences, and letting your personality shine through.
So it's about being memorable for the right reasons. Yeah.
Not just trying to fit into some preconceived mold of what a perfect candidate should be.
Exactly. It's about being confident in who you are and what you bring to the table.
Right.
The guide also suggests finding ways to weave in stories and anecdotes
Okay.
that illustrate your skills and experiences.
Okay.
People connect with stories, and it can help you stand out from the crowd.
That's a great tip. I'm going to start brainstorming some stories that I can share in my next interview. Because, let's face it, sometimes those standard interview questions can feel a bit dry and impersonal.
I agree. And the guide encourages you to think about what makes you unique, what sets you apart, and how you can share that in a way that's both engaging and informative.
Okay, so you've made a great first impression. You've navigated the questions and you've shared some memorable stories.
Right.
What happens next?
Hmm.
What does the guide say about following up effectively after an interview? Because I know sometimes it can feel awkward,
Yeah.
like you're overstepping boundaries or being too pushy. I get it. It can definitely feel tricky.
Yeah.
But the guide emphasizes that following up is a crucial part of the process.
Okay.
And it doesn't have to be awkward or intrusive.
Right.
It suggests sending a personalized thank you note or email within 24 hours of the interview,
Okay.
reiterating your interest in the position, and highlighting something specific that you enjoyed discussing during the conversation.
So it's not just about saying thank you. It's about showing that you were paying attention, that you valued the conversation, and that you're genuinely interested in the opportunity.
Exactly. And if you haven't heard back within a reasonable time frame, the guide also suggests sending a polite follow-up email
Okay.
to inquire about the status of the decision.
Okay.
It shows that you're proactive and that you're still interested in the position.
That's really helpful advice. I'm going to make a note to set reminders for myself to send those follow-ups because I know it's easy to let things slip through the cracks when you're busy or feeling nervous.
It is. And the guide also reminds us that even if you don't get the job,
Yeah.
you can still gain valuable insights from the interview experience. It encourages you to reflect on what went well, what could have been improved, and how you can use this experience to prepare for future interviews.
That's such a good point. It's like turning every interview into a learning opportunity regardless of the outcome.
Exactly. It's about embracing the growth mindset
Right.
and recognizing that every interview is a chance to refine our skills and learn more about ourselves and the world around us.
Wow, this entire deep dive has been such a revelation.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much goes into mastering the art of the interview.
Right.
From the initial preparation to the follow-up and everything in between.
I agree. It's been a fascinating exploration.
Yeah.
And I hope our listeners are feeling as empowered as I am to approach their next interview with confidence and a newfound appreciation for the power of conversation.
I know I am, and I want to remind everyone that this deep dive is based on an incredibly insightful guide to interviewing techniques, which is packed with even more valuable tips and strategies than we had time to cover today.
We just scratched the surface.
Yeah, I highly encourage you to check it out and explore it further.
Yeah,
You might be surprised by what you discover.
you really might.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into interviewing techniques.
Yes.
It's been an incredible journey, and I want to thank you for sharing your expertise and insights with us today.
It's been my pleasure. I'm always excited to talk about this topic, and I hope our listeners have found it as valuable as I have.
And to all our listeners, we wish you the best of luck in your future interviewing endeavors.
Yes, good luck.
Remember, every conversation is an opportunity to learn to grow and to connect with others in meaningful ways.
Absolutely.
So go out there, embrace the challenge, and happy interviewing.
Happy interview.